Okay. So my guest today, this is John Earl, and this is SoCal Water Wars. This is my podcast, Fire and Rain. And my guest today is Connor Everts. He's been a frequent guest on here, and you'll see that he's very experienced in water world on many fronts. And so we're going to talk today about the possible resurgence of the concept, at least, of big desal. And so. Um, some years ago, 2022, and I'm going to try to share something with you all here. Back in 2022, Connor and I were at the May 12th, 2022 meeting of the California Coastal Commission, at which time a final vote was taking place. Actually, there were two votes on two parts of the project that had to be approved or disapproved. And finally, after 20 years, after a 20-year battle, which Connors and I were there from the very beginning, starting in Huntington Beach, California, in Orange County, until the very end on this day. And at this meeting, Coastal Commission, going against the will of Governor Gavin Newsom, voted, the members of the commission, all 11 who were present, voted unanimously to turn this project down. And here I'm going to show you just the reaction. You won't be able to see or hear the audio because this app doesn't have that. Subsec hasn't arranged that yet. They're working on it. But here you'll be able to see. Well, there you go. You can hopefully see them. You can see some movement on there. They're a little bit choppy. But there's a lot of clapping and yelling and screaming and so forth. And so I'm going to go down here and just read a little bit about why let's see if I can get a quote here. So the executive director of the Coastal Commission gave a little summary of why he was recommending, why the staff, the scientists at the Coastal Commission were recommending the squelching of this project, this proposed $1.4 billion ocean desalination plant for Huntington Beach, getting it out of the way forever. And he said, first of all, I think we all agree and recognize that the ongoing historic drought is a crisis in California and that desalination facilities will be part of California's future water portfolio. Unfortunately, the desalination project before you today is the wrong project in the wrong place at the wrong time. He predicted that sea level rise would surround the site later on, and the area would be flooded by increased or more intense storms, inundated eventually by that sea level rise, which Poseidon had to account. There was a lack of a coherent and adequate mitigation program for the project's severe effects on local and marine life. The measure to build the plant will likely result in impacts upon the surrounding area that haven't been analyzed. There were environmental justice issues. The cost to upgrade the plant will be substantial and will be passed on to ratepayers, many of whom referred to today are low income and cannot afford such exorbitant water rates, unquote. Ocean desalination sites in the state, he said, should be prioritized based on the critical need of the new water supplies for a particular area. In addition, all other less environmentally damaging and less expensive water supply alternatives should be explored first. And then he said, feasible and appropriate mitigation must be required consistent with the law. In my view, this project fails to meet that standard and is a bridge too far. So I won't bring up the other article I had at the time shortly thereafter, but it was basically of the project proponent for Poseidon, Scott Maloney, who was the point man for the project, gathering all the support he could for it over the much of the past 20 years, since about 2010 or 12 when he started, admitting that big desal projects, profit-inducing projects, desal projects, were a thing of the past in California, and the smaller ones which are, in his view, much less profitable, like the Doheny project in Orange County would be the wave of the future, of whatever future there was for desal. So now I'm going to just in just a second here go to one more website here to show you, and then I'm going to turn it over to Connor to get his response here. So let's go back to your screen sharing again, and so here, now, now here we have this is an article by USA Today, in which a group of investors, uh, uh, people who want to attract investors, got together and made a proposal here. And the headline is "Crazy or you can see Crazy or Genius: Nuclear Powered Solution to the West Water Crisis." Basically, they want to build up to 7 uh, very large desal plants off the coast of certain federally controlled areas in California and in Mexico's Sea of Cortez, or maybe it's called Sea of Trump now. I'm not sure. And I'm just going to go over very quickly. And this is beyond anything that seemed to be imaginable. But I'm just going to read some of their bullet points here, and then we'll get Connor's reaction to this because he's been following this in detail here. And so, what's in the 40? This is the $40 billion plan they have, and it's the blue ribbon plan envisions 8 large desalination plants off the coast of California and Mexico, powered potentially by small nuclear generators of the kind championed by the White House. That's Donald Trump's White House. Electricity could also come from solar or wind farms, which Trump has repeatedly tried to kill such projects and has succeeded. Building the plants would cost about $40 billion, the project proponent claimed. The plants would potentially be built in the Sea of Cortez and federal enclaves like California's Pacific Coast. I didn't say specifically where those enclaves are, which would limit environmental roadblocks. Desalination work by removing salt and ocean water, getting salty water. Something goes on to the effects that they have on toxic on aquatic life. Fresh water will be pumped at least 100 miles inland to reach California's Imperial Valley, a vast desert that today is irrigated with Colorado River water and grows crops from alfalfa to for lettuce and onions and so on. And the new water, the so-called new water, would allow California to give up some of its Colorado River allocations. So this would be a paper water transfer. Burr believes the plan could be privately or publicly funded. I would say most likely it'd be, if it ever got going, a public-private partnership, which is more attractive for investors. He said the pendulum against overregulation environmentalism is swinging back in favor of ordinary Americans and business owners who otherwise would have stopped the construction of Lake Powell or Lake Mead. And then it goes into other proposals and criticisms from the environmental community, which I'll say because I think we'll go into that here. And so let me go back here to my home screen here. I'm going to stop sharing here. And Connor, you got to turn your camera back on. There you are. Okay, so what do you give us your response if you're not too shocked? If you're not too traumatized. And,
first, your sound was going in and out. So when you go through, edit your sound.
Okay,
you can. But here, hopefully, you can hear me clearly.
I do.
Okay, so you and I have been at this a long time. I've been doing water work since the 80s, when I decided, amongst the other water and environmental issues, that I would just pick one. Actually, it was my father said, pick the one you care the most about, and it was water. So we have seen various proposals to kind of create this sense that there's an abundance of water and it's not a finite resource, and we can continue to waste more than we use. And it's a complex issue. So desalination, the idea that you can take ocean water and convert it, is kind of an engineering holy grail. However, it's not really a solution when you come down to a sense of priorities, which is what we really lack in the water world. So, in my background, I have worked for municipal water utilities. I've worked with an engineering firm coming up with kind of what we used to call appropriate technology solutions on saving water. I've worked with state, county, and local governments on all of these issues. And now I'm working with nonprofit coalitions. One of them is the Desal Response Group, because in the late 80s, there was a proposal when I was living in the little town of Ojai to build a desal plant, which was actually built and sat idle for 24 years in Santa Barbara. It sat idle because we go through these cycles, and we're seeing more and more with climate exchange of extremes of dry. I don't like to use the drought because the drought never ends, really. That's the way we should think about it. But then also we get these floods, and we've certainly felt that in the last winter. So with those cycles, we really have to maximize our local water usage so we can capture rain when it falls, even on a very local level, like we do here in the city of Santa Monica, with huge cisterns and other systems to reuse water. But the desalination is kind of a sexy technology thing where people think we can just supply a huge amount of energy without thinking of the impacts on the intake or the discharge, which are both massive to fisheries and other marine life. And we can it just somehow pump that water in to our system. Of course, it's all going to have to be pumped uphill, which is even more energy. And we know from experience of working on this issue for so long with regulators, um, even the World Health Organization, that there's a problem with boron, which is a naturally occurring element in some desert areas as well. But when you have too much of it, which you would have in ocean water, it will kill plants. It also has an impact on male reproductive health. Essentially, it shrinks male testicles. So, my real question is, why are we even still talking about this? Because we go through these waves where we kind of tend to ignore the fact that demand has gone down across urban California and the whole West. We have some excellent studies from the Pacific Institute in Oakland. There's a new West Virginia study as well, showing increases of population no longer mean a greater demand for water as we have become more efficient, and we can become far more efficient. Orange County, where you live, John, is a great example of taking recycled water, which is wastewater, and cleaning it up multiple times to the point where it's cleaner than what comes out of the tap, and then reintroducing it back through the groundwater and then treating it again when it comes up. That's
Actually, I live in San Diego County now, and we have the other, not example from the opposite spectrum, and that's the Carlsbad desal plant. But go ahead.
right. But San Diego County, especially inland, is looking at doing these pure water programs, and they've already broken ground. Inland, the city has been talking about it for a long time, but that's really a real future. So when we went through the process, and I think we met at a desal meeting around in the early 2000s in Huntington Beach over Poseidon, we had the element of a private company trying to make profit and looking for a location. They had come from Florida, where they had failed. Ironically, it was my original boss when I left California. I was in New Hampshire. Jerry Maxwell went to get his PhD in Florida, and he ended up being head of the Tampa Bay Water Authority, which attempted with Poseidon to do a plant. It was a series of disasters. Somehow, that 25 million gallons a day plant was sold out here first to San Diego County with a 30-year take-or-pay deal, which is the only way it would make sense for the private industry, which now we have found makes no sense for a public regional water wholesaler who's looking to offload that water. First, they were looking to do it to Arizona. Then they were looking to do it to an exchange. It looks like it might happen to what's called Eastern, another regional wholesaler. And so that they'll move that water, which is going up to $4,000 an acre foot, and try to replace it. with water from the Colorado River, which is, quite frankly, we've known this for a long time. We continue to see it with terrible levels of snowpack. Um, Even when we had a lot in California, they weren't getting it in the Rockies. So we have diminishing supplies. But the paradox here is, and the strange dichotomy is, despite ourselves not making a priority, we are becoming more efficient. It's not always water agencies who actually sell water as a commodity that are interested in those levels of efficiency, but actually businesses, industry, institutions, and people themselves. So my real question is, I would say it's not the technology stupid when we apply it to desalination. We thought when, as you mentioned, the Poseidon as a company said we're done in California and the day of big desal is done. Um, the governor had pushed it heavily and then used his power to push one in Monterey area in the town of Marina with huge opposition, which hasn't been resolved or built yet either.
How
The
big
other
would
one,
that one be? How big would
uh,
that one be? How big would that
uh,
proposed plant be?
I'm trying. It's small. It's less than 10,000,
Okay, so it's a small one. Okay.
but it's not like the small ones like you're potentially talking about in the latest pipeline fantasy of these, modular nuclear desal plants being built up and down the coast, which doesn't resolve the issues of the intake and the discharge, doesn't resolve the issues of pumping the water, and really doesn't resolve the primary thing we should talk about, which is need. Do we really need these plants? Do we need these, what we call zombie water supply boondoggles that have been around for many years? The other two that I've been challenging for as just as long, 30 to 40 years, are Cadiz, which is a desert water mining project. Um, and the third one is this whole concept of building a delta tunnel now underneath. It was a peripheral canal voted down by the people. These projects invest huge amounts of money, huge amounts of time, both for the agencies and for us as environmentalists and ratepayers and taxpayers who challenge them, and they never seem to get built. And the ones that do, like Poseidon and Carlsbad, we find we don't really need. So it's a discussion, but I think it's just a distraction on what should be the real priorities of water, because we do have the impacts of climate change. We do have, and we've seen, essentially the death of fisheries off of the coast because of these intakes, including the nuclear power intake, which in Diablo Canyon they're about to reopen and given another extension when even the utility that owned it, PG&E, didn't want to do that. So we really have to be, in these times especially, there will not be federal money to build these things. There will not be private money to build them. But we want to kind of save ourselves from ourselves and somehow maintain crops like alfalfa in the desert and new development in Arizona, where I hear the developers are fighting a good rule that would have said you had to show where water was going to come from for the next 100 years. So it puts politicians in a tough place because they want to look like they have an answer. California passed in the midst of the then driest period of 2014, 2015, a groundwater bill. Water should be put underground. We should clean up our aquifers, and we should use that as a priority, not new dams, not reservoirs with heat and wind. Um, but how do we transition and how do we make this change? I would say, I hope in my lifetime, where we stop having these pipeline fantasies of having ever more water from sources that never really deliver and are way too costly, um, and do what we've actually started doing and been doing successfully in a lot of places, including Southern California, which is maximizing our local water.
So talking about uh, pipeline fantasies and so on, and also the funding for some of these projects. Um, So let me see if I can. I don't know if I need to bring this up, but I can read it off here. There's a proposal, another proposal. A report just came out recently from so-called California Policy Center. Are you able to hear me as I'm
Yeah,
speaking
I
up?
can hear you clearly now.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
And this report is authored by Edward Ring, who we both know, and director of the so-called Water and Energy Policy, and some others like that, and saying that they seek to the report they came out with is called "Creating Opportunities to Bring Seawater Desalination to Coastal Federal Lands of California," and it suggests that federal actions to facilitate desalination facilities on federal coastal lands, streamlining approvals and promoting partnerships with local agencies and so on, can secure long-term water supplies. And it goes through that, that basic thing. It says seawater desalination is successfully used worldwide and so on, could boost water reliability. So that's these are from the abundance crowd, the eternal abundance and more abundance crowd there. So now they're optimistic because of Donald Trump, who, although he's eviscerated funding so far in all the worst ways of and just every single federal agency there is, especially when it comes to dealing with climate change and so on, it eviscerating any mention of it in any federal publications or bills or policies or anything. So they've got a friend there. I think they have a friend there, and not sure yet about the Oh, he definitely supports these kind of projects. I think you could probably bet on that. But how much funding would actually uh, come from the federal government? That probably is still up in the air. But they're all very much in support of that. So, what do you think? And then there's some other proposals we can go on too that have come out of the San Diego County Water Authority. But what do you think of that? I mean, what's the likelihood? I mean, if anybody knows of this crazy president we have who's got us in a, a hugely expensive war that's tanking the world economy, and so he might actually be all for funding these the craziest of the crazy desal projects. Don't you think?
I wouldn't guess what our Mad King knows or doesn't know. What I'm more concerned about is the undoing of both drinking water standards like PFAS. A lot of things a lot of us had worked for a long time on had compromised the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, which also impacts water quality. All of these things are, politically um, at risk and being trying to take apart, including the National Energy Policy Act, which is the national review, CEQA, which is our California Environmental Quality Act. Those regulations are there for a reason and for a need. We have over 1 million people without access to safe, clean, and affordable drinking water and sanitation in the state. That number's gone down with some focus on it. But if you take away federal subsidies and put them on projects where they shouldn't be applied, meanwhile, we're in a great financial hole. Um, the state no longer has a surplus. The federal government goes more deeply in debt. War has a huge impact on everything, on resources. Um, and redirects money away, and we don't know when and if and or how that will end, and the impacts will long be felt on the economy. So, where is there money to invest in these pipeline fantasies, as I like to call them? Um, there isn't. So, if you don't know how you're going to pay for a project up front, and you're not willing to evaluate the environmental impacts, or cost of these projects. Again, I don't know why we're talking about them. The irony is the projects we don't really talk about and celebrate are actually working and working well and maybe our only alternative um, as we move into the future. And affordability is a big issue. It's not just a buzzword, it's having real impacts on all levels of families. In all the chaotic and volatile times we live in right now, we should be making some rational choices. And those rational choices aren't going to come from the federal government, and I don't think they're going to come from the state government. So these things are going to have to be locally directed. And water is a vast empire of individual agencies with these larger wholesalers like the Metropolitan Water District, the Orange County Water District, the San Diego County Water Authority, and then underneath them, all these water resellers, both private and public. So there's really not a cohesion on these issues, even on the Colorado River with the 7 states, and we don't get enough input from those impacted in Mexico on what's left of the Colorado River Delta. We can't come to consensus on these issues. So, we can set up deadlines that get bypassed again and again on the Colorado River negotiations, but the issues are real. So we're going to have to come up with a new way of solving water problems. And I don't think it is, the sense that there's endless abundance, that we can build endless expensive housing, not affordable housing. And we can disregard rules that have been in place for years. So going out into the federal seas, which means you're going offshore and away from the coastal commission, doesn't resolve the issue. You didn't mention, but there's quote unquote new, but it isn't really new technology that's being proposed for offshore desalination. There's one called Ocean Well with buoys offshore. There's another technology using tide power. That Ocean Well got a pilot, and the other one in Fort Bragg went through the Coastal Commission. So we're studying these things. But while we study these things, we're having record heat in March. I grew up in California and I've never experienced these extremes. The fires we had last January, unprecedented in terms of the heat and the wind and the dryness. So manufacturing water for private entities and as a commodity is a concept that just totally has to change. I would suggest people read or reread one of my mentors, Dorothy Green, who's kind of the matriarch of a lot of environmental groups in Los Angeles and beyond. And Managing California's Avoiding Crisis, I believe it's 2007 UC Press. But a lot of what she was talking about then, has really come true. It's saying that we really have to refocus how we think about water, both short term and long term. Otherwise, we're having these same discussions 40 years later, and conditions aren't getting better. And you're also reaching a tipping point where people can't afford water. They can't afford water to garden. So they're going to start using their own gray water systems. We want them to do it properly, but they're going to capture the water that isn't the black water, toilet water in their house and reusing it. We're going to be forced, because the high cost of water, to rethink how we use it. And we're going to have to rethink how we do governance in water as well. We can certainly consolidate, but we have to know how to do that better. A good example are the community of Altadena, which is LA County. So they fall out of a municipality, but they had 3 water mutuals and a little bit of the city of Pasadena servicing them. Water hasn't been restored to those areas. Sanitation hasn't been restored. Those water mutuals actually came out of an ag era many years ago and don't really have the capacity, one, to deal with a disaster, but even two, to supply clean, affordable drinking water, what we call the human right to water.